we are here this morning for an update on the Dennery Polyclinic. You would be aware that the sod turning for the Dennery Polyclinic was held earlier this year. I think it was in March. Yes, and it forms part of the Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, otherwise known as DVRP. We're here just to get an update on the project from the various members of the ministries involved. We have with us this morning the Minister for Economic Development, Housing, Urban Renewal, Transport and Civil Aviation, the Honorable Guy Joseph. We also have with us the PS of the Ministry of Economic Development, Mr. Philip Dalsu. Also joining us this morning from the Ministry of Infrastructure is the PS, Mr. Ivor Daniel. And we have some other team members here with us this morning. Mr. Egbert Louis, who's the Managing Consultant of ECMC, and some of his team members here as well. We have from the Ministry of Health, Consultant Engineer Mr. Norman Saintville. We have Ms. Jackie Joseph, who's the Social Planner with the Ministry of Health. We have Mr. Monty Emmanuel, who's the Chief Engineer with the Ministry of Health. Also joining us this morning, Mr. Dwight Calix, who's the Chief Health Planner, and Ms. Cheryl Mathre, who's the Project Coordinator for the World Bank Project. Everyone will obviously be introducing themselves as they take the podium. I now hand over to the PS, Mr. Philip Dalsu, who will provide us with an overview of the Dennery Polyclinic project. Mr. Dalsu.
Today, we would like to give you an update on the construction of the Dennery Polyclinic. As Nicole said, the sod turning ceremony for this project was on March the 8th at the project site in Boisjoli, Dennery. The Dennery Polyclinic is one of the projects being implemented under the Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project. And the DVRP, as it is known, is being coordinated by the Department of Economic Development, Transport and Civil Aviation. And it is also financed by the World Bank. Now, it was estimated that the construction period for the Dennery Polyclinic would have been 18 months. The construction for the Dennery Polyclinic has, however, not progressed as smoothly as it should have, and we have encountered some delays. The major agencies, as Nicole pointed out, that are involved in the construction of the Dennery Polyclinic are the Department of Infrastructure, Port Services and Energy, and they are the executing agency for the project. The Ministry of Health and Wellness, they are the beneficiary agency, and the Department of Economic Development, Transport and Civil Aviation as the coordinating agency for the project owner. The consultant on the project is ECMC Limited, and it's led by the Managing Director, Mr. Egbert Louis. The contractor on the project is Travis Earl. We also have Mr. Norman Saintville, who provides project management support to the project, and Ms. Cheryl Mathre, who is the project coordinator in the project coordinating unit for the World Bank projects. In order to provide an explanation for the delay in the project, I would like the team from the Department of Infrastructure, Port Services and Energy, led by Mr. Ivor Daniel, who is the Permanent Secretary, to provide an account from the executing agency perspective. He will then be followed by Mr. Egbert Louis, the consultant from the ECMC, who would also share his experience from the consultant perspective. The other agencies involved will provide support. After the presentations from Mr. Daniel and Mr. Louis, we will then take questions from the press. I wish now to call on Mr. Ivor Daniel.
This project emanated from the Economic Reconstruction Program with the ERP under the Ministry of Health some years ago. It received funding from the Caribbean Development Bank. So it had a long history. In Hurricane Thomas in 2010 further compromised the site, the Dennery Hospital site, and it's now refurbished with the assistance of the World Bank and the DVRP. And you could well imagine at the time that even the access to that particular site has and still remains of concern, given a weather event. If it floods heavily in January, the possibility of getting access to the existing site would not be possible. And so the government decided they would proceed with a construction of a polyclinic at a new site, which is at Boisjoli. This project is funded now by the World Bank. The designs emanated from the ERP, brought across through the Department of Economic Development, through the PCU, and now to be funded under the VRP at a cost of $13.74 million. The project duration should be 18 months. The project, as indicated, was launched on March 8th, 2018. The Department of Infrastructure is engaged and involved in this project as the executing agency, supported by Department of Economic Affairs, Economic Development, Ministry of Health as the beneficiary agency. The Department of Infrastructure has engaged the services of the ECMC, led by Mr. Egbertlui, engineer, as the project manager or the representative of the chief engineer. The contractor, Travis, as mentioned before, has taken possession of the site and has been attempting to execute the project to the best of their ability and in keeping with whatever contractual obligations and arrangement that we have with them. However, in reporting to us from our project manager, for some weeks now, it was brought to our attention that there are, again, from the project management standpoint, requests for information, which is RFIs, in their technical terms. And we as the Department of Infrastructure, we've been attempting now to respond or to answer those requests for information. And it has proven very difficult for me as permanent secretary, as the accounting officer. It has caused us not sleepless nights in a sense, but many hours of discussion and deliberation at the Department of Economic Development. And it has caused us as agencies and along with the Department of Health to bond together as a team. Normally you find ministries operating in silos and they don't come together. But it's been able to bring us together as three critical agencies. And it has caused us to understand, even our consultant, how he operates and how he executes his mandate. And so we've been attempting to resolve the various issues that have been pertinent issues. They are flagged in his report as pertinent issues, which is the RFIs. But it has been determined by our consultant that those RFIs require a deeper technical or engineering intervention. And that intervention, again, would now take itself out of the realm of the PS's office and would require some other technical assistance. So along with the PCU, we've now gotten the assistance of a design review engineer, not the initial designer, to undertake those reviews in order to provide the required responses to the contractor, to allow the contractor to execute the work. So a contractor wants to do his work, contractor is asking, what about this particular matter? What's the measurements on this side? And it requires responses from the consultant. Consultant now says to his employer, you need to give me some responses. Employer now has to go to, because it may have financial and other implications for the project, has to go to the PCU and say, hey, please assist in whatever way, shape or form, we need to provide those responses. So here we are, we have been delayed, and in an effort to now move forward, which we will speak to a little later, we are now at the point where we thought it necessary to bring this matter to your attention, to let you and the people of Saint Lucia know that we are doing everything in our power to ensure that we do not compromise. Again, there is an issue of quality, there is an issue, various issues of a technical nature on the project that if we were to execute it the way it's designed, there would be some issues that we would not want to in any way compromise and put anybody in any danger. And so we felt necessary to correct those information. And so we've engaged a consultant to get this going for us. Once that is done, we will now get back on track with this project, and we want to do this very soon. Mr. Louis, as the project manager, will assist me with the technical issues and to bring to your attention whatever technical matters that we're speaking to, and just to give you the assurance that we have indeed have this under control, and within a matter of days, weeks, we will have the project back on track the way we expected it to be. Without saying anything further, I just now, permitted also invite Mr. Louis to give us the technical end of things before I say anything, and then I begin to look like an engineer. So, Mr. Louis, it's your turn.
Just to say that ECMC, the consulting firm, we were engaged sometime this year in February to be the supervision consultants on the project. We have been reviewing the drawings. We have been reviewing the contract. We have been reviewing the specifications. In responding to, or attempting to respond to some of the issues raised by the contractor, as the PS said, request for information. Because of our scope of services, we were unable to respond to issues that were relating to design, right? A number of those issues that were raised by the contractor, a number of the issues that we observed as the supervision consultants were related to design, right? One of the critical issues that has brought us to this stage is that during the excavation of the foundation for the buildings, we recognized that there are 2 or 3 ravines which pass through the site. This, of course, meant that we would need to undertake some sort of redesign of the structure, right? This was one of the pieces of information that the contractor requested. Having requested that information, we now had to provide the clarification for the contractor, right? Clarification could not be provided by ECMC, the supervising consultant, and we obviously asked the client, being the Ministry of Works, to undertake, to prepare that information. Currently, we have a number of RFIs, requests for information, that have remained unanswered. And as a result of that, the ministry is forced now to seek alternative services so as to get the redesigns or designs or modifications of the structures so as to move forward, right? Before you ask the question, right, as to why there is a consultant and that consultant is not doing those designs, right? As I said earlier on, our responsibility was specific to the supervision, right? We dealt with supervision of the works. Our scope does not include design. As I indicated earlier on, in review of the drawings, right, what we were noticing that there is some issues referencing the missing information, right? There is one particular issue that we got where we had to undertake additional excavations because of the proximity of the building to the slope, right? But most of the issues would be related to the design, right? And just for you to understand, once the foundation is found to be substantially more adverse than what is anticipated, right? One would, of necessity, because of the type of structure, have to redesign the structure, because a particular section of the structure is going to be much deeper than the remaining section. So this is one of the most critical aspects of it. The design had DCA approval, but I am not here to defend the DCA, but I could say to you that's not the DCA's responsibility. That is the responsibility of the owner and its consultants.
The construction of Dennery Polyclinic has been on the cards for a long time, right? So Dennery has what we call the hospital, and it was deemed that the current site was not suitable. And I guess the conceptualization of a new health facility for Dennery, it was felt that there would be improved services required, and was felt rather than building what we have now in Dennery, was to expand the range of hospital services. So it wasn't one or the other, but both St. Jude and Dennery. Both are being given attention. I guess with St. Jude there was a review done that now has been completed, and there is a way forward that has been established for St. Jude. Very soon we will be coming to the press to explain that way forward. But it's not to be seen as one against the other, but we need both facilities, one in Dennery and one in Beaufort.
With respect to the two facilities, it's not a difference in priority. In terms of developing the entire health sector, we had to focus on different areas. With St. Jude's will deal specifically with secondary care. With Dennery facility, and especially in terms of the services that we had to provide, P.S. Dawson was correct that when we assessed Dennery Hospital in its original state, it had not provided those particular services. In fact, the polyclinic that we would provide, that we are actually undertaking now, would have provided upscale services with respect to diagnostics, with also respect to services from environmental health, an essential health team approach. So in terms of development, when we speak to development of the health sector, we are dealing with both St. Jude's and also Dennery Polyclinic as a simultaneously to ensure that the health sector can respond adequately to the needs of the population.
Is it normal? I think what I can say in response to that question is there were these missing bits of information. Project management is not a perfect science. In some cases, there may be things that you don't anticipate. And the responsible thing to do at that point is to really make the modifications now so that you don't have to deal with implementation issues later in the project cycle.
All of these are rather normal circumstances, especially when you're looking at construction. When we went in, when you do the excavation, if there are issues that we find, you would have to redesign so that the building can suit its structure and it suits its function. Even for instance with OKU, there were some redesigns done. This is why we have as-built drawings being created. So wherever you may encounter situations, it is quite normal within the project management to relook, reassess, redesign, and move forward.
First of all, you would have, from my end, a very concerned permanent secretary. I'm very worried because when it was brought to our attention from Mr. Louis, quite a number of RFIs. I think they range from about much like the 10 to 12 RFIs that we've been, they come in and they repeat it at every monthly report that we are unable to respond to. There are indeed issues from the client or the beneficiary agency perspective, issues of the accommodation, whether there are poles falling within the center of a room. Minor issues like that. There are also issues whether concerning with seismic. Right now we have the issue of climate change. We have the issue of the frequency of seismic events. And so the consultant, having conducted his review, his structural review, is seeing that, hey, we need to make some modification to this. And I'm not saying this to you from his perspective because I need to say it. I'm saying it to you as my client that you need to do something about this and look at it very closely. I must say to you that it was escalated to the level of the World Bank. The engineers at the World Bank took a look at it and felt that the advice provided to us by the consultant was strong enough to warrant us taking a step back, reflecting, and to decide whether we would come to the people of Saint Lucia and say, hey, we have a delay in time. We have to trade off time on this project. We won't compromise quality. We won't compromise the delivery and the costs, but we have to trade off the time. So people of Saint Lucia, we're saying to you that we are now at the point where we need to redesign, we need to slow down, we need to redesign, or else this project will not be able to move forward. Because we would have a contractor on site who would be unable to proceed. And if we were to proceed with it, some years down the line, we would encounter a lot of issues of a technical nature on this very same project.
The situation with this project, this government is a very transparent government. It is just that some of the information we give is not readily accepted. So the issues that we are dealing with today in relation to the polyclinic, as you would see, the technical team that is responsible for the project, they are the ones coming to give the information. Because if it came from a politician, most likely it would be taken from a different perspective. So they are not driven here by politics. They are driven here by the professionalism in what they do. And we were advised, we were given good advice, I believe, in terms of the approach to take to deal with these issues concerning the polyclinic. There are two things that we could have looked at. We could have said, we need to finish this project before the next election. So let's overlook this and let's take a makeshift approach and try and complete it. Whoever would have the problem 10 years down the road, that's their problem. But that is not the approach of this government. We believe that anything we are doing, especially for the future, must be done well. And I must compliment ECMC for the advice that they have given, the direction, because here you have a consultant who's on a job and who's taken the risk of possibly not being the consultant moving forward on that job to say, I'm not putting my reputation on the line to allow you to build something that does not meet the standards that are required. And the entire team, as indicated by the PS, from health, from infrastructure, from economic development, everybody came together. We reviewed what was presented, and we decided that we need to come to the public. Do not allow somebody else to give you wrong information. So we have given you the information that is reliable, that is dependable, and that is to tell you that we are focused on the best quality. We are making no shortcuts in any project that we are doing. We are giving the best quality available. And I compliment the entire team for being here today and for making the information readily available to everyone.